Could the Panthers possibly go with a center over a wide receiver or edge rusher in the second round? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So either at me or DM me. But of course, follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We are just over 2 weeks away from the beginning of the 2024 NFL Draft. And on April 26th, the Carolina Panthers will be officially on the clock. As I try to pull up my calendar, yes, April 26th, the Panthers will officially be on the clock at pick 33 and 39 in the second round. And also they're slated to pick 65th overall there at the beginning of the third round. We have sat here, we've had Trevor Sikkema on the show, Jordan Reid on the show yesterday to discuss the options the Panthers have there on night two in the second round in particular, especially when looking at the wide receivers that could be available, the edge rushers that could be available. And we talked briefly about the centers that possibly could be available once the Panthers do get on the clock there on Friday night later on this month in Detroit. And I want to focus in on the center position on today's show. We talked about this back in January or February, I forget when it was, when I did the whole series of how to fix the Panthers offensive line. I told y'all that it was time for the Panthers to draft a center. After listening to Jordan Reid yesterday discuss how the Panthers may have to take one in the second round, especially to get a starting caliber center, I am even more on board with wanting to get a center on night two of the NFL draft at the end of the month. And looking back at it, how I got to this point, this mindset, well, the Panthers, they haven't drafted a center in 17 years. The last time they did that was Ryan Khalil in 2007. He was selected 59th overall out of USC, the one in Southern California. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. His final year in Carolina was in 2018. Since then, it's been a merry-go-round there at the center position, much like it has been at left tackle until Ickey Ekwonu has held that spot down the last 2 years. Think back to when Jordan Gross retired and all the men who had to step in at left tackle and who either had middling success or just struggled and failed spectacularly. The Marshall Newhouses, the Byron Bells, the Russell Okuns, the blindside Michael Orrs, Mike Rimmers, who single-handedly lost that Super Bowl down in Santa Clara. They had plenty of players get an opportunity and just not play at a high enough level. They spent the money in free agency on a player like a Matt Khalil, Ryan's brother, when Ryan was still here as a center, and that failed spectacularly. The best way to garner a top-tier left tackle is to do what the Carolina Panthers did in the first place with Jordan Gross, and that's to draft one. And they have done that now with Ickey Ekwonu. Now, whether he becomes a top-tier left tackle, that's still TBD, especially coming off of last season where he struggled mightily. My hope is now with Joe Gilbert as the offensive line coach, new scheme, that Ickey, also more experience, will be a better player than he was last year. You want to see him play kind of at the level he played as a rookie, but even be better than that moving forward there at left tackle. But again, the best way to find a left tackle is to draft a left tackle. And in my opinion now, the best way to find a starting caliber center is to go out there and to draft one instead of going out in free agency and trying to bring those players in. Matt Paradis started here in 2019 and in 2020. He was coming off of a broken leg during the 2019 season, did not play well, was much better in 2020 than in 2021. He was the starting center until he tore his ACL, and that's the last time I believe he's played in the NFL. Then Pat Elflein, who the Panthers, they went out and signed him and Cam Irving in the first 5 minutes of free agency, two of the lowest graded offensive linemen in the NFL over the last 3 seasons prior to them being signed in Carolina. Those two came to Carolina. Pat Elflein had been a center in the past in Minnesota, got an opportunity to play guard in New York with the Jets. Now he came to Carolina, got an opportunity to play guard, struggled at it. Then moved over to the center, was much better at that spot than he was at a guard spot. So good that he got the opportunity once again in 2022 to be the starting guard until he hurt his hip. Bradley Bozeman, who was signed that offseason in 2022, then took over as a starting center, played well. The Panthers re-signed him last year, which I felt like was a key decision for the Panthers to make. And Bradley Bozeman did not play well this past year. They've tried Paradis. They've tried Elflein. They've tried Bozeman. And now they're going to try Austin Corbett this season. You can tell the whole merry-go-round of centers that we're going through right now in Carolina. Austin Corbett, someone who has been a good player for the Panthers when healthy. He has not been healthy over the last season, considering he tore his ACL in the final week of the season back during 2022 when this offensive line really looked like it had the continuity and the talent to be a unit that finally would be fixed. We saw last year that was not the case, in large part because Austin Corbett only played 4 games. And the 4 games that he did play, he did not play well because he was coming off of a torn ACL injury. Had another injury to his knee. That same knee had repaired the offseason prior, but it's a lesser knee injury than it was with the ACL. And the hope is he can come back, play at a high level, but at a center position where he's only spent time at during OTAs a couple years ago when he was still with the Los Angeles Rams. At no point has he played at the center position in the regular season. So they're taking a fairly large risk in Austin Corbett coming in and being a good enough center. Can he make the key snaps? A third down long, pressure-packed game? Is he going to sail it over Bryce Young's head? Is he going to throw it into the dirt? Or is he going to put it right there on Bryce and make things happen? Is he going to be able to call out the protections? Can he take on that leadership role? And he's a vocal leader, as Dave Canales, new head coach here in Carolina, has said. I just look at a player who's primarily been a guard, then back in college was a tackle, now being asked this late in his career to be a center. Not that he can't do it. I just look at the rest of the offensive line where the Panthers spent a ton of money at the guard spots, bringing in Damien Lewis to be the starting left guard after he spent time in Seattle with the Panthers assistant offensive line coach, bringing in Robert Hunt to be the starting right guard after he had a spectacular season in Miami last year, not giving up any pressures at all. 2 road graders to bring those guys in, to bring that money into that position, bringing back Taylor Moton, believing in Ickey. The Panthers have really tried to fix this offensive line. I just look at the center spot and I wonder, have they done enough? Is this just a Band-Aid over a hole that just cannot be stopped? Like, I don't know. I'm just wondering if that's the right thing. And when I look at the rest of the NFL and just look at the top graded centers last year in 2023, according to Pro Football Focus, these guys were drafted by their teams. Frank Ragnow was drafted by the Lions. He was a top-rated center. Connor Williams of the Miami Dolphins, he actually was drafted by the Cowboys before coming over to Miami, so he is one of the exceptions. Drew Dahlman, third-year player at the Atlanta Falcons, had a breakout year as a center for them last year. Creed Humphrey, the Chiefs drafted him. He's been a 2-time Pro Bowler there now in Kansas City as they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. Eric McCoy, as we know, in New Orleans has been a solid player for them. Jason Kelsey, who just recently retired, spent his entire career in Philadelphia helping them win a Super Bowl. Tyler Linderbaum helped the Ravens get to the number 1 seed into the AFC title game in Baltimore. He was someone we spoke about a couple years ago. Would it make sense to draft Linderbaum in the first round as a center? And he's gone to Baltimore, and he has been able to excel at that spot. Ryan Kelly in Indianapolis the same way. Andre James off in Las Vegas. And then Lloyd Cushenberry, who the Panthers wanted to bring in but got outbid by the Tennessee Titans. He was drafted by the Broncos, and he spent his first 4 years in Denver. He just signed with the Tennessee Titans. But the top 10, only one of the top 10 graded centers last year, according to PFF in the National Football League, were brought over in free agency. The rest of them were drafted. So my opinion is the Panthers need to draft someone. Austin Corbett can work out, certainly. Is he the long-term answer at that spot? No. The Panthers need to be looking for their long-term answer. They believe they have a long-term answer there at left tackle in Ickey Ekwonu. At least that's their hope, with another year of experience coming and in a new offensive scheme, new offensive line coach. Hopefully it works out for Ickey. Damien Lewis, Robert Hunt, they're looking at those 2 guys to be their starting guards for at least the next 2 to 3 seasons, 3 for Hunt, at least 2 for Lewis. And then Taylor Moton, we'll see what happens there. But as far as Corbett goes, this is probably his last year in Carolina. I would like for the Panthers to address the center position in the draft. Now, the concern about that is they have other needs As we know, wide receiver, I still believe, is a big need for the Panthers. Edge rusher is still a big need for the Panthers. It's corner, linebacker, maybe if you want to do that. Safety could be a need. The Panthers have other needs. Center, offensive line, that absolutely is a need, in my opinion. But will the Panthers be able to get a top-tier center if they wait? Or are they going to have to choose a center over a wide receiver or maybe even an edge at pick 33 or 39? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? And personally, for me, some days I like to just sleep in. Some days I like maybe get outside, play a little golf. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, it's flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. The Panthers put a ton of resources into the offensive line so far this offseason. They've signed Damien Lewis to a contract. They've signed Robert Hunt to a $100 million deal. Will he ever see all 100 of those $1 million? We will see, but they're expecting those two to come in, be the starting guards, protect Bryce Young, and also open up some holes in the interior for the Panthers to run the ball with Chuba Hubbard and possibly Miles Sanders here in 2024 as Dave Canales takes over as the Carolina Panthers head coach and play caller on offense. Ickey Ekwonu's back at left tackle. Some fans want to see him move into guard. Other fans wanted to see him stay there at left tackle. I was of the opinion, let's ride it out. As I just mentioned, the best way to find that starter at left tackle is not via free agency. The Panthers tried that for a decade, trying to replace Jordan Gross, and it did not work out. And that's not to say that they could not go out there next time around and try again and then nail it. I just feel like the best way, and typically, as just looking at the draft, the best way to build your team is through the draft. Best way to find those premier type of players is via the draft. And the Panthers, I'm hoping, have that player in Ickey Ekwonu staying at left tackle. Then Taylor Moton is back at right tackle. One spot the Panthers have not addressed is a center position. Now, they've addressed it as far as who's going to play at center once the season gets started, at least up into this point in time. We don't play a game in Carolina for a while. Until September, the games that actually matter. Now, preseason, obviously important. We saw last year there were some alarm bells that were ringing, especially about the offensive line. That turned out to be very true. Preseason does matter, but the games of actual consequence aren't going to happen until September. So the Panthers, they have time. But they only have so much time to really find an answer, as the last kind of chance to do that is going to happen at the end of the month up in Detroit as the 2024 NFL draft gets underway. There's, of course, a roster cutdown day. There's some other free agents that are going to be available throughout the summer, but the time to really want to address a position of need is in the draft. And Dan Morgan has come out and said they want to be a team that builds through the draft. What a novel concept there, Dan. But you've done a pretty good job so far. We'll see whether it actually materializes into wins once we get down to the games being played in the fall. Now, here's the one thing about the Panthers needing a center. They need a wide receiver as well, and they need an edge rusher, in my opinion. Now, taking a step back, when we really look at those spots, though, they have been addressed so far this offseason. And I've gone over last week what I believe the primary needs are, the secondary needs, and then some positions that you can't really be mad at them for wanting to address, because if you look at the roster, there's a lot of spots the Panthers still need some players. They're largely devoid of talent, and that's why they're in this hole right now, coming off a 2-15 season, having yet another head coach, and trying to now focus finally on building through the draft. But looking at wide receiver, the Panthers did bring in Deontay Johnson. They traded for him, an excellent trade by Dan Morgan. Hopefully it works out that same way once the season gets started. And I have a lot of faith that that's going to be the case. Adam Thielen, he's, of course, back here for another season in Carolina. They have Jonathan Mingo back here, Terrace Marshall. They brought in David Moore for his second stint as a Carolina Panther, who he actually made the roster this time, TBD. So they've at least done something. They brought a receiver who's been a Pro Bowler, who's been an All-Pro as a returner, and who can separate. Something the Panthers desperately need. Oh, yes, and he has playmaking ability. Looking at edge, the Panthers lost Brian Burns, lost Yetur Gross-Matos, but then they signed DJ Wonnum to a 2-year deal. He's coming off of a good season in Minnesota, and he will be a starter. They've signed Jadeveon Clowney to a 2-year deal as well, and he's getting paid starter money. The Panthers have 2 starters. They just drafted DJ Johnson last year, Amari Barno the season prior to that. They also brought in K'Lavon Chaisson, a former first-round pick in his own right in Jacksonville, who's so far been a bust. It's not like they haven't done anything at the edge rusher spot since watching Gross-Matos sign in San Francisco and trading away Brian Burns. They've addressed it. Center, they haven't addressed. So there is a legitimate argument to be made that they're good at edge. And when having conversations with Jordan Reid and with Trevor Sikkema over the last couple of weeks, they're not really of the opinion that any of these second-round guys, whether it's Darius Robinson or Chop Robinson or Adisa Isaac, Chris Braswell, are going to turn out to be that alpha edge rusher. They think that they're going to be secondary guys, that they're going to be just dudes you rotate in and out. And are the Panthers really looking for that in the second round, or are they looking to find someone who could actually be potentially a decade-long starter like Ryan Khalil was at the center position here in Carolina during his career? Like, there's a great argument to be made that it makes more sense for the Panthers to get a center opposed to just getting a guy just to put in there to just have another body in the edge rusher room. And just because they don't think any of those guys will actually turn out to be an alpha kind of edge rusher does not mean that's actually what's going to happen. It's just 1-2 men's opinions on those players. Now, they have expert opinions as they are hired by Pro Football Focus and ESPN to cover the draft on a yearly basis. And I appreciate their thoughts and I appreciate their time. Just, we got to understand that's their opinion. And there's other people throughout the NFL draft community who believe the same thing as them, but maybe believe that Braswell is going to be a stud, that Chop Robinson or Darius Robinson, Adisa Isaac, they're going to be studs as well. There's people who are part of organizations who believe and don't believe in those individual players. So we have to understand that when having this conversation. I just look at it, and as I've been someone who said wide receiver and edge, maybe as this draft process goes along and I try to find new things to say every day about the same damn thing, maybe my eyes are opening to center makes more sense than edge, because Clowney's probably going to be here. Just looking at the contract, let me see if it's finally on overthecap.com, because the last time I checked, I don't think it was up there. Let me find Clowney's contract real quick. Okay, it is up there. So looking at Jadeveon Clowney's contract and overthecap.com, he's getting, as we know, 2 years, $20 million with a potential of $24 million max. It is $12 million this year as far as all the total money he's getting. And then next year was cap number $6 million this year. It's $14 million next year, in next season. And if the Panthers wanted to cut him, they would get $6 million dead money and they would save $8 million. They could get out of it if they wanted to. And the same case with DJ Wonnum. There's really nothing about his deal that would preclude the Panthers from getting rid of him if he does not live up to whatever the expectations they have for him. Only $625,000 of dead money next season, and then $7.5 million they could save. So they could save $15.5 million if they want to get rid of both of those guys. The hope is that they would keep around both of them for next season, and then they could still, if it is a need next time around in the draft, which I think it probably will be, they can spend that first round draft capital on someone who can truly be a difference maker at that edge rushing spot for the Panthers over the long haul. So looking at it, yes, they could be done with these guys after a season, but they could also keep them around, and they're going to start this year, and whoever you draft at edge is not going to start. Center, though, that player could actually come in and start for the Panthers. Wide receiver, I still don't feel like they have a true number one. Deontay Johnson is going to be that, just looking at the rest of the roster in a way like Adam Thielen was. The thought was he'd be the 1A and then Chark would be the 1B. That was never the case. Adam Thielen was the number 1 and the number 2 because the Panthers did not get enough of quality play out of the receivers last year, and he was really the only option. That's going to change this year with Deontay and with Adam Thielen now here in Carolina. But they've at least done something at wide receiver. They have not done anything at center other than just move a player who's coming off of back-to-back knee surgeries inside to play that position for the first time as a true starter in the NFL. So would it be worth the Panthers waiting until the third round? Maybe not. And maybe thinking about it now out loud with y'all on the show today, the best thing for them to do is take a center, even if it is at 33. That's just a thought, not necessarily my concrete opinion, but man, thinking out loud, kind of hard to disagree with, right? So let's look at it. Who are the options for the Panthers potentially, and could they afford to wait until round 3 or even day 3 to get their man? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. It's very possible that on the show today, I've convinced myself that center is a bigger need than wide receiver and edge for the Panthers, considering the Panthers traded for Deontay Johnson and that they've gone out and signed DJ Ekwonu and Jadeveon Clowney, and they also drafted DJ Johnson last year, and they have Amari Barno, and they brought in K'Lavon Chaisson. Who knows? Maybe this is the year where K'Lavon Chaisson shows that first-round talent that the Jags believe that he had coming out of LSU. And they're not the only team in the league that believed he was a first-round talent. I'm sure there was probably over a dozen teams, if not more, who believed that he was going to be a first-round talent. That has not so far shown to be the case in his first 4 years in Jacksonville, but that's not important right now. What's important is his development here in Carolina and getting the most out of him as a rotational edge rusher. Jadeveon Clowney, we know what his talent is. We know that it's been up and down, but the hope is after last year's 9.5 sack season, back home in the Carolinas around his family, that he balls out again this year and next year. The Panthers want to keep him around for 2 seasons. And that DJ Ekwonu, he shows that whatever. I played opposite of Danielle Hunter. That didn't matter. I actually put up the stats because I have talent. And he's ascending into one of those roles as a player who can be a plus number 2 edge rusher on your team. So we'll see how all that works out. But it's not like the Panthers haven't done anything at edge. Wide receiver, I still don't feel like that's a position. If I'm going to choose between the two to ignore in the second round, it would be edge, because they have Clowney. They brought in Chaisson. They have one of them. They have their starters, and then they have their rotational guys. Go out there and see what you can do. In next year, they may be in position in the top 10, depending on how things work out. That's how things typically have worked out here in Carolina of late, where they can get really that A++ type of difference maker at that edge spot, where maybe the second round guys that we've talked about and that have been discussed with us may not be that. But who knows? Only time will tell why that's the case. Do you wait, or do you get that player right away? I've had a listener on the mailbag ask me, or not even ask, but suggest to me that it makes more sense for the Panthers to wait. They already have their starters. Just see what those guys have, and then if they're no good, or if they are good, whatever, you address it next year. Because you're going to have to address it at some point in time as far as a long-term guy and a true replacement of Brian Burns. Does it have to be now? Not necessarily. I feel like if you can, why not do it now? But if these two and the others that were brought in, those two being Clowney and Ekwonu, and then the others being brought in, or K'Lavon Chaisson, maybe wait. We'll see. But wide receiver, I don't feel comfortable waiting there. I like that they've fixed the offensive line as far as the guard spots. We'll see how things work out at center with Corbett. And, of course, conversation we're having here today about the center position overall and the draft and the tackle spots. I feel fine about those. Feel good about Moton, and I'm cautiously optimistic about Ickey getting back to playing at a above average level. I'm not even gonna say he played at a high level as rookie, but at above average level. He wasn't giving up sacks there for a long portion of the season. Feel good about that. And running back should be fine. Don't invest in running backs anyways. Miles Sanders, whether he stays or goes, I'm not too concerned there. Chuba Hubbard, think he can have a good season this year, especially with the way the offensive line is built. It's just the receiver spots, because you don't have a tight end who's a reliable pass catcher, no matter if you're a part of the Trimble Hive or not. There's just not someone that you can sit there and just say without a doubt, oh, yeah, that's a guy, because there's just not right now. Maybe one emerges. Maybe it is Trimble. Maybe some they draft. We will see. Wide receiver, it's Johnson. It's Thielen. And outside of that, I still don't have a lot of confidence, which is why if I'm going to choose between wide receiver and edge and which one to ignore in the event that the Panthers favor a center, it's going to be edge that I ignore. Now, looking at the center and some of the options, say the Panthers decide wide receiver 33, then looking at 39, looking at a center, who could possibly be available? It really depends on how the draft shapes up. And that's kind of the way that Jordan was talking to us yesterday. Did not want necessarily speak in absolutes, which is smart because no one knows. It's just in his opinion, these guys probably are going to be there and they're probably going to be there. Because he brings up, okay, if you're a late first round guy, that also means that you're like an early second round guy, which means you're going to be there potentially at 33 or 39, or you could be already gone by that point in time. Graham Barton, he's a name that we've talked about. He started off as a freshman at Duke playing center. Then he transitioned to tackle where he became an All-American, All-ACC player, really good player. Now he's projected to be a center. Mel Kiper Jr. of ESPN.com has him as his top-rated center. Zach Frazier, player who, Jordan Reid, who we talked to yesterday, he thinks Panthers should go after him. He has actually mocked Zach Frazier to the Carolina Panthers. He's out of West Virginia. He's the number 2 graded center, according to Mel Kiper Jr. Then there's Jackson Powers Johnson. Surprisingly, Jordan told us yesterday, at least surprising to me, I thought that this was a surefire first-round pick. He was going to be, and he may still be. There's differing opinions everywhere. But it appears that maybe Jackson Powers Johnson as a first-rounder is not as much of a slam dunk as I and maybe many out there believed. And if he's available at 33, it's going to be tough to pass that one up, man. I don't think I'm going to wait 6 more picks to see whether he's there at 39. I would want to get him. And if they do, I would want him to compete immediately with Austin Corbett. Getting more depth is not a bad thing. If Austin Corbett loses out to a rookie starting center, that's great for the Panthers' future and also great for their present. Because in the present, you get to throw out a rookie out there to go out and to play and to get that continuity with Bryce Young and with the rest of the offensive line, who he should be around for the next couple of seasons with. And you also are able to have Austin Corbett there as your quality depth at guard and even at center in the event something happens to the rookie, whether he's not ready or he gets injured. God forbid that will happen. That's also the case. And then looking down the future, you have your starter right there right away. And we'll see. Jordan believes that the top guys, as far as the starting caliber guys, are not going to be available. I'm hoping to talk to Dane Brugler of The Athletic, who believes that there's an over-under set at 4.5 as far as starters at center. And I'll have to ask him whether he believes that the Panthers could not wait until pick 65 there to start the third round to get their starting center. I'm just looking at the top ones. It's Graham Barton out of Duke. It's Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. It's Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. And all 3 of those guys, just based off of the mocks, based off of the intel that I've read and what we've been told here by Trevor and by Jordan Reid, those guys will not be around come 65. And the Panthers maybe need to use 33 to ensure that they get those players. The rest of them, Cedric Van Pran Granger out of Georgia, they could maybe wait till the third round. It seems like they certainly could wait. Tanner Bartoloni out of Wisconsin, Bo Limmer, Matt Lee out of Miami. Like, those are guys that it sounds like they could wait until day 3 to go out there and get. And they could have someone just sit back for a year behind Corbett and learn. Or they could have someone, like I mentioned earlier, come in, compete, and potentially win the job. Competition needs to be there no matter what. Like, Yosh Nijman should be here competing with Taylor Moton and really with Ickey Ekwonu. Like, I don't think he's going to take Taylor Moton's spot, but he should be here to compete. Competition. That's what the Panthers need to have at all of these spots. So that's the center board. You're just looking at it. Barton, Frazier, Powers Johnson, like a dream scenario is one of those 3 ends up in Carolina, whether it be at 33 or at 39. But if you're asking me, the Panthers got to decide between wide receiver and edge, and they're already taking a center. I'm taking wide receiver, I'm taking a center, and I'm still going all in on this offense like this team has done all offseason long and doing right by Bryce Young. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get your questions into me right now for this edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.